Hi, friends, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Mindful Constitution podcast. Sorry if I always sound winded. I feel like pregnancy, this stage is like, I always feel winded just literally sitting down talking. But I am joined by Kaitlin, who is from Taking Root Education, which is nature-based education and mindfulness. And I'm so excited you're here. Hi, Kaitlin.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, girl. I don't know if anyone saw, we did do a live a while back over on Instagram. So you may already be familiar with Kaitlin, but I will, let you get started more so than me introducing you. But before we dive into like what you do and talk about mindfulness and nature-based education, all of the logistics of your job, I always love just clearing space at the beginning to talk about your personal path to the work you currently do. So how do you feel about starting there?
Yeah, that sounds great. Awesome. Thank you, Katie.
Yeah.
So my personal path. So I've always had a love for nature. We'll just start there, right? We'll go chronological order when I was a child.
Start from your day of birth.
I would still am barefoot all the time outside, but always be outside with my dad. He got us into like camping and fishing and hiking and just always had such a tie with nature because I've just felt so calm and at ease. And it just felt like my spot, my little safe spot. So I knew like in high school, I wanted to go into school for environmental science because I loved the environment. I wanted to save it and I wanted to learn more about it. So after I got my degree in environmental science, I worked as a wetland scientist for 3 years, which I loved. I loved like the field work part of it. I loved to be outside, but like I was alone a lot, just like me and the plants, or like working really long hours. So I just felt like, okay, what do I really want for my life? What do I want my life to look like? So along the way, I was told by multiple people, like, well, why don't you be a teacher? Why don't you look into being an educator? And I remember being like, no, like brushing that off. And I remember like vividly, I studied abroad in New Zealand for like a field study program. And my professor at the time was like, you should be a teacher. And I just, of course, was like, no, not for me. But I ended up going back to school to be a teacher. So I ended up getting my science teaching certificate.
Okay, actually, I will be a teacher. Like, when did you change along the way?
That's a good question. I think I honestly was just like, you know what? I'll give it a shot. Like,
you're like, enough people keep saying this. So, God damn it, I guess we'll just do it.
Yeah, like maybe they saw that in me that I didn't see yet. And like I was pretty lost at that time. Like it was a big crossroads of what I wanted to do in my life. I was definitely feeling like anxious in myself. And at the same time, speaking of being anxious with myself, I enrolled myself into yoga teacher training. And I literally just started yoga. And I thought, like, how am I going to be a yoga teacher? Like, I just started myself. But that was such a huge modality for my healing and my wellness journey during that time frame, and still now, right? That's what I implement a lot in my business as well. So I worked at Seacoast Science Center to test the waters to see if I wanted to work with kids, and I loved it. Of course, that was like a camp style, so it was a lot more like we were outside. It wasn't like a traditional school setting. And then working at school, I had taught 7th grade science, which I loved because all life science was the subject. I always had my kids get outside and moving, and as much as they could, I would teach them yoga and do like mindfulness and meditations with them all the time.
Such a good age to integrate that. I feel like it's such an angsty time, 7th and 8th grade, just like what is happening in life, and such a good source of relief to provide them, especially at that age.
Yeah, right? Like think about where were you at when you were 12 and 13? Like you're trying to figure out yourself.
Like just a weird, confused little weirdo.
Yes. And I think everybody could be like, yep, me too.
Yeah.
and that's why I loved that age so much, because it was helping them kind of figure themselves out, right? And like they could be
Mm,
quirky and you could be wise with them. So it was it was fun. I liked it.
mm.
So I guess, where am I now in my chronological order? So this past year, I took a leave of absence from the public school system. I still teach online, sixth, seventh, eighth grade science. And I took the leave to start my business, Taking Root, which, as Katie mentioned, nature-based education and mindfulness. So we're outside in nature, we're practicing different mindfulness techniques. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit later too, about like not one size fits all. So kind of figuring out which mindfulness technique works best, but really building like that resilience, right? Having that self-confidence, that body awareness, connecting with each other, connecting with nature. So important. So that's what brought me to my business, combining both of my worlds of outdoor education and mindfulness.
Yeah, so good. I know. I feel like I said this in our live, but I just am surprised there's not so much more of this, especially for kids. I feel like such a good opportunity for them to spend more time outside and reconnect to the spirit of mindfulness, emotional regulation, self-regulation, all such powerful tools to learn at such an early age that I think is really lacking. And you also said, not you touched upon the idea of one size not fitting all when it comes to mindfulness practices. And I think mindfulness is kind of like thrown around as this, like, it's kind of like a trendy word. I feel like that
Mm-hmm.
people are just like, what does mindfulness even really look like specifically? And when you're practicing mindfulness, so would you mind elaborating on the specifics of different techniques that you teach that people can then personalize to themselves?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, in addition to like the one size fits all, it's same with age, right? So like it's not just kids. So I teach like mostly to preteens, teens, and adults. So the
Mm,
different mindfulness activities that we'll do, like we'll do different breath works together, meditation, we'll go on nature walks, right? Because nature just in itself offers like all this stimulus that makes you be present in the moment, right? You like have to be in the moment. And all we can do some nature hikes. We could look at plants, right? Identifying plants, really noticing what's around you, like finding that connection. That is all part of mindfulness. Some yoga, mindful movement. So journaling, reflecting, right? So maybe one of these works for you and not any of them do, but we'll just try to work together in these sessions and kind of see which one works for you. And then you take that away and that's like your tool that you get. And I think that's like my main thing is yes, these are sessions you have to continue to practice because mindfulness is a practice, right? It's noticing those
mm,
thoughts, noticing those feelings, those physical sensations without any judgment. And it can be a lot easier than we think it is. Like we can overcomplicate it. And I feel like we might have talked about that in our live too, about like overcomplicating like meditation, right? It could just be
mm.
like, all right, I'm noticing my thumb on this mug.
Yeah, really just that spirit of presence and
Mm-hmm.
being in the moment as opposed to kind of, we have such a tendency of fixating on like something in the past that
Mm-hmm.
we're dwelling on or worrying about future or even not even necessarily worry in a negative way, like excitement about the future, anticipation about the future, but never really being present in the moment. And so I always think of mindfulness practices, and that's like what meditation is being able to be present and observe your thoughts rather than kind of like attaching to them, is at least how I
Mm-hmm.
think of it. And yeah, sometimes it's like, and I kind of did that when I first started meditating, where it's like you put a lot of pressure on calming yourself down, and it kind of defeats the purpose of meditation in the first place, is just to like sit there and center yourself. And sometimes your mind is more busy than others, but I feel like that's part of the practice as you get more and more accustomed to like tuning into the calmness of it and not trying to control your experience as much. But when you think of like the most simplified definition of mindfulness, how do you explain it to people?
So I would say kind of like what I mentioned, just noticing those thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations without judgment, right? Period. So that means like you're human. And I've talked about this with my students or all of my students, regardless of age. Like you're always going to have thoughts in your head, right? It's not about taking away these thoughts, but it's about just noticing them and letting them pass and like not attaching to them. And when we like can continue to do that, right? That's when we get into giving ourselves some self-compassion, which is the whole other piece of mindfulness, right? Because you're not judging yourself, being hard on yourself for those thoughts. You're just kind of letting them pass. And reminding yourself you're going to show up differently every day. So today, maybe you had a lot going on upstairs, maybe tomorrow, not so much. Maybe it's more like physical sensations. So yeah, just really noticing them and not judging them.
Yeah. Self-compassion is such a good piece. That's where I feel the switch flips a little bit. Switch flips. Yeah. I'm like, am I making sense?
Flip switch. No, switch. I don't know.
Flip. Like pregnancy brain. It's so nice to be able to blame things on that. But
then you can say baby brain after.
Yeah, exactly. Sleep deprivation brain. So yeah, sorry, my phone's going off over here. I think that's such an important piece too, because a lot of times that's where we find ourselves attaching to our thoughts and judging them, or the voice of the inner critic coming up a lot, or even just our internal to-do list, like all of the things that we have running through our brain constantly, the monkey mind of it all. And so I actually wanted to talk a little bit about too, I think a lot of people look at meditation and it can be I think it's becoming way more mainstream and accepted as a practice for just overall well-being, and something that's equally as essential to a healthful diet or physical movement, or, this idea of like stress reduction and stress management playing such an important role in our overall well-being. So talking a little bit about some of the actual physical benefits of meditation, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah. So, you could just say this about mindfulness too, as like a whole umbrella, like, right. It reduces our stress, our anxiety. It can help us have better connections with ourselves, which once we have those better connections with ourselves, then those are going to be outward, right? Then we'll have better connections with others. Especially like, for example, in the workplace, right? I've done a couple sessions for women in business specifically. So it's like, okay, it can help you reduce burnout because you're not going, because you're actually checking in with yourself and seeing how you're doing, seeing how you're feeling. And it will increase, like I mentioned, self-awareness, that body awareness, self-compassion for yourself. I feel like the benefits of it are just endless. And you could say the same thing of like, okay, what's happening to those who are not practicing these things? Well, you're going to see all the opposite things of what's happening and going on with them.
Yeah. Lack of awareness in our interpersonal relationships and social connection, the lack of connection to ourselves. I think that connection to our body too, and like being in our body that we can achieve through mindfulness is such an important connector in health, because I feel like a lot of times, and this is one thing too, I noticed with people who stop drinking, working with sober curious clients, is they start to really realize a lot of the ways they feel in their body that maybe they were masking with alcohol. But I think the same thing can be said when we're like constantly preoccupied or constantly on the go, and we're never sitting with ourselves long enough to really connect to our body and see how we feel in our body, and notice like, where do I have aches and pains? What does food actually make me feel like, different foods and the effects it has on me? Like, what are the healthiest habits and choices for my body, and how do I feel with those? And that's where kind of mindful eating can come into all of the things. So yeah, really interesting. And I know there's so many brain benefits with meditation and mindfulness. Or like cognitive benefits that we see. And I know it
increases your cognitive function for sure.
Yeah. And that sense of creativity and imagination, I always feel like is really enhanced when we take that time to be, instead of just constantly on the go. And yeah, it can be even just a few minutes a day, but I totally can notice a difference in my creativity. So yeah, and then the reduction in stress and gut health and all the things. So that is endless, really.
But the ripple effect.
Totally. So, okay, one thing I want to talk about with taking root and the creation of the business. I know you kind of like felt yourself, and we've talked about that outside of this, is like feeling a little burnt out by your regular 9 to 5 job and working in the classroom. And so what about what you were doing felt unsustainable in the 9 to 5 world?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, I think any teacher who's listening to this is probably like, yep, been burnt out before. Because there's a lot in the teacher culture, right? Because you just want to give so much, but you're not giving back to yourself as much, which is unfortunate. And we have to switch that stigma, I guess, if you will. So for me, especially, I just found that I was just trying to do too much. Like I was at school teaching, and then after teaching, I'd teach at the studio, or I'd teach teen yoga club, or for a little bit, I was doing like donation-based classes for the staff because they need it and want it, and I wanted to give back to them. And it was just becoming too much. I was just trying to do all of my things in my worlds, and I was just getting myself burnt out. And I knew for me too, like, I'm a pretty efficient worker. So when I was at school, I just felt like I had so much I wanted to do and give, but there was only so much I could do and give in these four walls. And like I said, my passion's always been alternative education. So I knew this was going to be a stepping stone for me. And COVID actually was definitely kind of a push of like, okay, is this what you want your life to look like? And I remember like making a website in my classroom, like for my business before I even knew the name or anything. Just wanting to follow my passion and go for it.
Oh my God, that's awesome. Wait, tell me more about creating the website one day in your classroom. Were you just like, all right, like I can't do this anymore. I'm making a freaking website. Like I'm out of here. Like how did that go that day?
I think it was honestly like a vision board, but I like doing website design. So it was like a little vision board website. And I was just looking at some other programs around the seacoast. And I was like, I just feel like there's just only nature-based for younger kids, but like older kids and adults need this. And like I could tie it in for mindfulness. It doesn't really look like many people are doing that yet, which I don't know why we're not doing it yet. And I just felt like this is the time. Right now is the time to focus on this. And it just, I remember like between my Zoom classes that we'd be on, because we were remote for a little bit, I would just do that during some of my preps because I was all caught up grading or whatever. And it was just it helped me get through those really hard times because I knew I had a passion and I knew what I wanted. It just wasn't there yet, which of course, like we talked about, like staying in the moment, it was so hard to be like, well, I want to be there. I want to be there.
Isn't it so hard when you start to like feel your soul's purpose developing, but you don't know what shape it's going to take? You just know it's not what you're doing. It's such a painful space to be in. I feel like people don't talk about it enough, where and I think a lot of people experience feeling like called to more than their 9 to 5 job or the position they're in. But society is just kind of like, oh no, this is what you do. You just like work a job that you kind of don't hate and hopefully,
tolerate.
Yeah. And so people normalize being mediocrely happy, but it's like once you start to decide that you want more, it almost feels like there's like a sense of urgency behind it. You know what I mean? You're like, all right, I have this idea. Like I must do it now. Now that I'm like calling, like I've got to do it right now.
Yeah, because you feel that pull so strongly, right? Like I just felt like now is the time. I have to do this now. I just felt there was no other choice, I felt like. And of course, fear, right? That's what's holding so many people back. And I definitely, I still have fear with my business, but that was a huge part.
Yeah. And uncertainty, I think too, stepping out of like a conventional 9 to 5 and into entrepreneurship, into something maybe you don't see all of the time. And it's creating something new. It is scary because you don't know how it's going to be received. You don't know if you're going to be successful, but you just know that you don't have any other option but to do it. It's pretty wild to see how it comes over you in that way. And it just is all of the sudden like, I need to do this. So good for you for pulling the trigger.
Thank you.
and in that classroom. And it does, I talk to a lot of people where, although COVID had so many negative aspects and so many downsides, obviously, it did provide this opportunity for so many people to reflect on what feels important, how they want to spend their time, a lot of time to reflect on what they want their life to look like. And so many people came out the other side with totally different lives.
Yeah. And like, I feel like it made you reflect like, well, what is stable? What is security? Because is anything
Right.
actually stable or secure? You know, it could change, even though it
Exactly.
feels secure.
Yeah, and people can work their whole lives for a company thinking like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. This is and then it's like you just never know. So it's like wouldn't you rather be and totally to each their own. Some people prioritize different things because of the experiences they've had. So for some people, the perceived stability of a 9 to 5 is so much more important, maybe because of the experiences they've had. Whereas to other people, that's not as high on the priority list as like feeling connected soulfully to what they're doing. And so everyone's
Yeah.
different, but yeah, so cool that the other thing I love about your story that I think is really helpful to share with people who are feeling a little bit lost on their path in terms of finding connection to the work they do or their soul's purpose is the idea of like piecing together all these seemingly unrelated background experiences that manifested into an exact accumulation of your past experience. So it's like the teaching, the yoga and the working on your own anxiety and the mindfulness and the environmental science, like all of those things that you did where at the time you're kind of like, I don't even know why I'm doing this teacher training. Like, I guess I'll be a teacher, but then look at how those led you to expressing what you're really aligned with. And so that can be helpful to remember sometimes too, like maybe we don't always know like where the path is leading us, but moving forward and kind of like continuing to move ahead and it all starts to take shape.
And so true. Cause like you wouldn't be where you are right now if it wasn't for those things that you did. Right.
Yeah. Oh
like
yeah.
all of it accumulating up.
Right. I tell myself that a lot about my thinking.
Well, I tell myself that when I have student loans still, I'm like, damn it.
Yeah. You're like, okay, well, like, it's worth it. I swear. I wouldn't be here today without these student loans that they're never going to forgive, but they talk about a lot. I'm like, why did you even
tease?
Yeah, why do you even tease us with that? Okay, so I know you touched upon this a little bit, like the idea of why specifically immersion in nature is so important with mindfulness because it facilitates that presence, just the nature of nature, right, is kind of awe-inspiring and kind of forces you to be present in the moment. Would you say there's anything else that you want to say about why using nature as like an inspiration for mindfulness is such a good fit?
Yeah, I mean, being outside just enhances like your overall well-being, right? Like you have the vitamin D, you're not so stimulated, right? So you're calmer to begin with because you're not like on your phone. You have the fresh air. Like who doesn't? It's always fresh air. What is it? Fresh air and salt water. Those are the things that I live by when you're sick. So we know that nature has extreme health benefits that we just don't. It's right there. Like we just need to tap into. And I just feel like there's just so much disconnect for that there shouldn't be. Yeah. And it just, like we mentioned, the sensory stimuli that you always have that helps you just be in the moment. And it just offers like that free organic connection and for self-regulation. It just aligns so perfectly with mindfulness.
Yeah. It's got all the ingredients for mindfulness. And
it's free.
Right. It's free 99, all the ingredients. And yeah, just providing an opportunity to, I always like love to like just thinking of the interconnected nature of ourselves with nature and being in that environment. And we spend so much time in like artificial environments and working from home. It just getting outside feels so important, even more so now than ever. I also notice, and I don't know if you feel this way, but I've really leaned into nature as a stress management technique for myself, just nature walks, on a regular basis. Especially just for me personally, when I stopped drinking, that felt like very regulating to my nervous system, but almost like to the point where I feel addicted to it now a little bit, where if I'm not getting outside, and so it's interesting. I definitely try to get outside at least once a day, for a walk. And if I can't every day, like 4 times a week, and I can start feeling myself when I'm not getting walks or time outside a little bit. I'm like, oh, I need to get out.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I need it.
Yeah. And it's kind of like addicting once you get in the habit of connecting to nature and spending time outside. It's like you kind of crave it.
Yeah. Cause you feel good. Right. And like, that's funny you say that too. Cause today I was like, oh, do I drive to go to the studio and take a class, or I could really go outside, even though the wind's whipping right now in New England, but it's sunny. And so like, I knew I was going to feel better, like having that check in with myself. Well, what do I really need in my body right now? What do I really need in my mind? So I chose to go for the walk, right? So same thing with those mindfulness techniques. Like yoga is one of mine, but I chose to do the walk instead today because that's what served me.
Yeah, switching it up and personalizing it to fit you and not only fit you, but fit your day, fit your mood, fit how you're feeling. I know we went for a walk on the beach today. I was getting sand blasted. I was like, okay. Gotta love nature, but this is going to be a short one today for sure.
Yeah, that was really cold.
Oh my God, freezing at Crane Beach. We're like, oh, there's no one here. Perfect. And then we got out. Oh, well,
Wonder why.
Nina's like spitting out sand. Me and John were like, oh, it's so nice. But yeah, so okay, switching gears slightly into, I know we've also talked about your own kind of sober curiosity. You don't like not drink at all, but you've really stopped drinking like as much as you used to, and it kind of coincided with your own efforts in mindfulness and your entrepreneurship. And so I would love to hear more about how, mindfulness, entrepreneurship, and how those things impacted your sober curiosity and the evolution of your sober curiosity.
Yeah. So I'd say for about a year and a half now, definitely the past year, especially. Well, I've been on a wellness journey for a while now, but in terms of the alcohol consumption, I just really started to, like, I knew I would drink a lot when I was stressed, right? Like as a teacher, you're stressed. Here's alcohol, here's liquor store gift cards for you for Christmas, right? It was just, again, that stigma, that if you're stressed, go have a glass of wine, right? So I just noticed, like, especially during more at the beginning of COVID, I was drinking a lot, especially teaching.
Yeah.
And then I just noticed, like, wow, I'm drinking too much than I typically would. And like, this isn't right. So cutting that back down. And then I was noticing, like, when I would drink, especially at night, like say right now, I don't know, it's about 5 here right now, or like you're eating dinner at 6 and maybe you had a glass of wine. I would notice I would just be up for like 3 hours from like 2 to 4 in the middle of the night.
That's so boring.
And I was just like, this isn't worth it. Like, I'm putting in all these like pasture raised meats, grass fed meats, like all this healthy food, and I'm spending all this money on my health and wellness, but like the alcohol is just contradicting that. And it's just making me not sleep. And then I don't feel good. And it just wasn't worth it to me. And I just found I was just feeling better when I wasn't doing it as much. And I've had friends that don't drink, and it's funny, like how you get kind of drawn into them. And instead of like meeting somebody for a drink as like a friend thing to do, it'd be like, all right, let's meet for a walk, right? A healthy opportunity, and having that connection. And I think that's a huge thing too. Like, I've just been so much more connected to myself. Like, it's helped along like my spiritual journey, and I'm sure it's helped tremendously with my creativity for entrepreneurship. Right. I mean, I'm like, nope, I'm good. I'm just doing this. Like, this is what makes me happy and fills me up. So yeah, I didn't like the feeling of feeling it too intensely anymore. So it was just a big shift for myself personally.
Yeah. Yeah. So many shifts. It's pretty interesting how we can work so hard in our health in some departments, but then totally not even bat an eye about like having a few drinks every single night and then wondering why we're
Mm-hmm.
not seeing the results we want. And it's like, well, just because that's normalized doesn't mean it's making your health and wellness that much more of an uphill battle.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to lose weight or get healthier, and the sleep, the 2 to 4 hour window where you wake up and you're like,
You're just laying there.
mild anxiety, just sitting there like, what? Even on like a few glasses of wine. I mean, I was never one to have like a few glasses of wine. Sometimes I successfully would, but I definitely remember those nights of just like waking up and not being able to go back to sleep, and you're tired.
You're just awake. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It really has an impact on our REM cycles. It's called, I think, rebound REM, where we kind of wake up and can't fall back asleep. But yeah, and then the other thing you said too was just feeling more fulfilled with the work that you do and more inspired by life. And that's something I can totally relate to. And I bet people listening probably can too, is when you're not feeling fulfilled to the work you're doing every day, it's really easy to check out every night because it's your soul isn't as inspired and alive. And like we were saying even before, when you're trying to find your purpose or kind of find passion or meaning in your life, it can be really scary. And we kind of normalize complacency or just being mediocrely happy with work because work is work, as they say. And so it can be a really kind of soul-sucking cycle of just doing a job that we semi kind of like and then self-medicating at the end of the day. But I've found the same thing, that when I'm doing work I'm really passionate about, there's just not that urge to check out every day. In fact, like I have to be like, all right, you need to stop working now.
Right? I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Because you're just, I'm like, all right, email's done for the night.
Yeah. Like get out of your office, stop working. Like it'll be here tomorrow. And I think there's definitely that correlation between soul fulfillment and a lessening desire to self-medicate overall.
Yeah. And like, that's so true too. Cause if you looked at like my path of limiting the consumption, it just kept getting littler and littler, like less and less, I should say. Right. So as I was stepping more into this role.
Yeah. And you said too, like spending time with people who, it's like you start to curate a world that reflects drinking less and then drinking less and not at all. And so then it's almost like, oh, my world is now reflecting the new choices I'm making and it feels comfortable. And I say all the time, like creating a life you don't need to escape is like the mindful constitution motto using holistic health. And I feel like that's so true. Yeah, with work and stuff as well as really holistically evaluating like what makes you happy and feeling happy, present, and content on a daily basis. So speaking of happy, present, and content, why do you feel like mindfulness is severely lacking in our society today?
Well, I think it's a lot to this one. There's just so much stimulus. Like we're constantly stimulated, right? And our brains were not wired or designed this way. We were not evolved to take on all this information constantly, right? Like we're consuming so much, whether that be information, food, alcohol, right? Whatever it is. And I feel like when we're in this state of like taking all this information, like that's when our nervous system can get out of whack. And then from there, like our nervous systems are on high alert. And for example, like for COVID, we were on such high alert that's then considered like toxic stress. And toxic stress in your brain relates toxic stress as trauma. So having these like stress responses, of course, for our body is natural. Like we want that, right? That's what's going to keep us safe. Like from, if you think about like when they always use the examples of like running from a saber-toothed tiger, right? That's what we evolved from to keep ourselves safe. So we want that, but practicing these mindfulness techniques, like it doesn't eliminate your stress response. It just helps you like build that resiliency to help regulate your nervous system. And like, that's what I feel like a big thing we could say of mindfulness is all about too, right? Helping you regulate your nervous system, building that resiliency.
Yeah, totally. I know that's a similar thing I talk often to people about with stress management and stress reduction is a lot of times people look at it as this like reactive thing when they're extremely stressed out, but really it's, I think, optimized when it's a regular practice of whether it's meditation, journaling, morning routines, nature walks, everything we've talked about that can help you build a baseline of stress resiliency because just like meditating once when you're stressed out, that's pretty much doing diddly squat in building
it's
like
a practice.
and building a baseline of resiliency. And people are like, oh, this shit isn't working. It's like, well, yeah, it's not going to work like that. But it's more so about cultivating like this sense of inner peace on a regular basis and creating a well that you can more easily access when you do feel stressed and return to when you do feel stressed. So it's like our inner reserves of stress resiliency. I feel like that is what it is because we can't avoid stress in our world. And
it's always going to be there.
Yeah. And it's like increasingly more overstimulating and just saturating us constantly with input. So I also feel like that you have to carve that time out for yourself too. Otherwise you're just like sensory overload constantly. And I don't know if you feel like you're a highly sensitive person, but I work with a lot of highly sensitive people. And I feel like it's really necessary to be able to find healthy tools for regulating your nervous system because a lot of the ones that were offered in society are like quick fixes or immediate gratification. And it's actually not very empowering solutions.
Yeah, and it can be, and I think that's the thing. Like I've gotten asked before, like, is mindfulness easy to practice or easy to do? I mean, it can be as simple, like I said, you can make it simple, but it is something you have to continue to do in order for those effects to happen. And like to build that, like build resiliency, you don't do anything one time and you're resilient, right? You know, you need to do it multiple times over time to build that up.
Yeah. And I think it's important too to say that it can feel really uncomfortable to practice mindfulness in a world that's so overstimulating, where we're constantly conditioned to be on high alert. We're constantly conditioned to be on the go. It's super normalized to just check out with self-medication that actually increases our stress. And so I feel like a lot of times a calm nervous system and putting yourself in situations to develop a calm nervous system feels really friggin' uncomfortable when you're used to being in chronic fight or flight. Like sitting, it's almost, and it's funny because people will always say to me, like, I can't meditate. Like, and it's always the most high strung people that need to meditate the most. I'm like, the fact that you say that you cannot like means to me, like you probably could benefit from it even more.
And having that closed mindset, right? They're fixed. That's a fixed mindset.
Yeah, right. Versus growth mindset or getting curious about it. But yeah, I think it's helpful to tell people too, like that it probably will feel like really odd to sit and practice mindfulness or getting quiet with yourself, observing your thoughts and feelings, and super uncomfortable if it's not something you've allowed yourself to do often, to like get curious about how you're feeling and why and where your emotions are coming from, and allowing yourself to process things instead of just like continue to power through your day or on autopilot.
Yeah, it can bring up a lot of things for sure. And that's a part of it too. Like I say that a lot in my yoga classes, like getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? So like knowing the difference, for example, like between pain versus uncomfortable if you're in a pose, right? Like, you know, like trying to really learn what your body's telling you. Because some people aren't connected with their body and they don't know, you know? But just kind of figuring out where in your body is like your line of, okay, I can stay and I can breathe here. right? And then if we practice doing that in these situations, right, in these when we're meditating or we're doing yoga or we're journaling, right, if you can practice doing it there, it's then going to translate into your life, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
on and off your mat, we say a lot too. So like if you're practicing them there, it's going to help you translate when you have these situations thrown at you, when you're not prepared for them and you're not in a space where you're doing these mindfulness activities.
Yes, I love that. I always think of that with triggers too, when we're working on our triggers. Like you can develop resources and tools, but it's like you're never really going to be able to put them to the test until like they happen in real life. And the only way that you're going to most successfully utilize them is if you've been practicing them on a regular basis and been practicing breath work or been practicing meditation and tapping into different mindsets, mantras, affirmations, things that you can help. It's not something you're going to do one time. And then when you're triggered in the moment, be like, oh, perfect. I have this all figured out. Like that's
wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, right. I know. So yeah, amazing. So, okay, let's see. Do I have any more questions? Oh, I was going to say this is my last one about mindfulness, but how do you feel like a kind of chronic lack of mindfulness, lack of presence, and just being on autopilot like many of us often are and operating in chronic fight or flight, how do you feel like that impacts not only our health and well-being, but our relationship to ourselves and others? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, just like I mentioned before, we're working to connect with ourselves internally, right? And if we're not doing that, we're not having that self-awareness, that body awareness, maybe not that self-compassion or that self-love. And when you can't do that with you, to start with you, it'll translate. It ripples out, right? It's maybe you won't have those strong relationships. Because we would be disconnected, right? Disconnected from ourselves, each other. And as I try to do with my business, like connecting with nature. So maybe we're disconnected out there too. So I think you could just say, and I don't want to say like it negatively does this and this, because I rather say, well, this is what it does do if you do it, right? So we know mindfulness helps with anxiety, with depression. We know it helps with self-regulation, with our nervous system. It helps with those social interactions, those relationships, helps with our emotional regulation. So just think, if we're not doing these things, then this is what's happening if we don't do them, right? We're not having those strong connections with ourselves or each other. And just, that's a lot of disconnect.
Yeah. I find too, one thing that really I've noticed through an increased effort in mindfulness is enhanced awareness around my own projections, if that makes sense. Like self-awareness. So realizing when things are my own shit that I'm kind of putting on other people more so. And I think it's just a lot of like bringing the subconscious to the conscious for me, where a lot of your programming and beliefs that are impacting your way of moving in the world, you can actually become more aware of them, which gives you, it's really empowering because you can realize like, okay, what role am I playing in this? And like, how is my own experiences and my own programming and my own background and
limiting beliefs,
my own limiting beliefs, how are those like impacting the way I'm seeing this situation or this relationship challenge that I'm having? Like, what can my role be? And I feel like that has been so enhanced through like both mindfulness and sobriety, obviously, because there's like more clarity. But that's for sure something I feel like is beneficial for our interpersonal relationships too, because like you said, the more connected you are to yourself and the more self-awareness you have, the less like we tend to kind of like point the finger at other people or we look and
because you'll look internal first, right?
Right, and see what role am I playing and how has I think that you just realize like it's everything is the eye of the beholder too. Like we all have different experiences. It's not like our perspectives aren't facts anymore once you learn to stop letting them dictate your you're conscious, like a fact. It's more like, oh, I see. Like all of this is just thoughts that I've been like, filled my head through my experiences or my family or my upbringing or my culture. And so it allows you to be more flexible in your thinking, which is, I feel, supportive of like a growth mindset or just being more curious about other people's experiences, which lends itself to increased connection too.
Definitely.
So definitely more like there is so many, like we talked about early, physiological benefits and like cognitive health and calming the nervous system and the sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system. But then there's like those spiritual, like self-reflective elements of mindfulness too that I think are so cool.
Mm-hmm. There's so much.
So much. All the things. But yeah, otherwise, I know we are trying to keep this to 45 minutes, which we did successfully. But I wanted to, crushed it. I wanted to talk about like where people can find you. And I know I'm not sure when this will come out, so I guess sharing like specific dates isn't always a great idea because it'll be a while before this podcast episode airs. But yeah, just share like where the best ways to find you is. And before that, also, what is your like top advice for people who are trying to get into mindfulness practice, one for mindfulness practice and one for entrepreneurship?
Ooh, okay. So for mindfulness practice, I would just say, just try something. And if it doesn't seem to fit, try something else. And then maybe if all those things don't fit, try them all again, right? Because you're in a different headspace and a different spot each day.
Mm-hmm.
So give it a try, and I think you'll find something, right? If you're looking for it, if you're looking to add this mindfulness practice into your life, you'll find something that works for you. I believe that. So for where you can find me, you can follow me at Taking Root EDU. So that is on Instagram and Facebook. My website is takingrooteducation.com. So I know not specific sessions. So every month we have adult nature and mindfulness sessions. We'll be doing retreats during the equinox or the solstices. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for that if you're interested. There's programs that I have for preteens and teens. So I go into schools with some of my programming, offer it out to homeschool families. There's also summer camps that we will be putting out there. And then let's see what else. So for those of you who maybe don't live in the Seacoast and can't attend one of my sessions, I'm just starting recording some virtual sessions. So it's like taking a walk with Taking Root.
Can't forget that.
So it's set up. Yeah, right. It's set up similar to how I run them. I know. Bring it on. That's my goal. That's my goal right now is passive income. So yeah, those are going to be great because you'll actually be able to download the audio recording and then you'll be given the worksheet as well that I'd be handing out if you were with me. So it's like you're with me, but you get to do it on your own time and wherever you want in the world. And I think that's all for now. I know I do want to do breathwork sessions in the future that you can download as well, maybe some yoga, but, yeah, so just putting it out there to teens, adults, businesses. So if you're interested, I do special group sessions and private sessions. So you can message me and find me through my website.
Yeah, girl. So many different things. I love that you're integrating breathwork too. We'll have to exchange notes because I just signed up for one too. So we'll learn together. And yeah, I really love what you said about trying them all again. And I would add having an open mind too, because I think with everything in our society being really geared towards like quick fixes, that we can sometimes expect results really quickly from things that are more subtle and gentle when done consistently. And so but can be much more transformational and empowering in the long run. So I love that. If it doesn't work, try it again. You're in a different state every day. And were you going to say something else?
No, I'm with you. I'm just agreeing. Yes,
Like
exactly.
anything else you got
Great.
words of wisdom for us? All right. Well,
No,
thank
I
you.
think that's it.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'll also put Kaitlin's information in the YouTube video caption and Instagram. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe and comment and do all of the things and share if you think there's anyone that could benefit from this information. And find Kaitlin for all of the mindfulness in nature that you could ever desire. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Katie. Bye.